Welcome back to the Wreck Silence Review Show. It's the second week of December, and we have 3 Rankin Bass Christmas soundtracks left to go. Now last week we reviewed the soundtrack to the film that started it all, 1964's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. This week we'll be reviewing the soundtrack to the next Rankin Bass Christmas special, 1969's Frosty the Snowman. Now, this beloved short is one of the big 3 of the Rankin Bass holiday specials, the other 2 being Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and 1970's Santa Claus is Coming to Town. Now this review is going to take on a bit of a different format, and as a result will likely be much shorter than usual, and I'll take a moment to explain why. So I watch this special every year around Christmas time along with the other Rankin Bass Christmas specials. It's part of my holiday ritual and I enjoy it very much. That being said, trying to critique this soundtrack on a track-by-track basis is practically impossible in this case, as several of the tracks are 30 seconds or under, and some are even under 10 seconds, and a lot of them are more musical motifs that serve as sound effects with light musical stabs for emphasis, as opposed to full songs or instrumentals. Now I have a few pieces from this soundtrack on my iPod, and if you only knew the amount of work that I had to put in to rip those songs, you'd wonder why the hell I even bothered in the first place. Now, unlike the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer soundtrack, which is readily available for purchase on Amazon for under $10 at any given time, this soundtrack was never released as CD. So back in 2010 I did a little research and found out that it was initially released on vinyl and was coupled with the soundtrack for the other Rankin Bass classic, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and that same vinyl was pressed to a limited set of CDs from the early to mid-90s. So I found a copy on eBay, used for $65, and as soon as it arrived in the mail, I went to rip it to my computer. It was expensive, but I figured that I was going to buy the Santa Claus is Coming to Town soundtrack anyway, so at least I got both of them in one. So I go to DB Power Amp to rip the CD, and something weird happens. Instead of gathering the metadata for the individual songs and the album artwork like it does for 95% of the CDs I put in there, all that shows up is one single audio file clocking in at around 35 minutes with no other information. No individual tracks, no album artwork, nothing. So I go to listen to that massive singular audio file, and by the time it was 3 minutes into it, I realized that this was the audio from the entirety of both films, verbatim, no edits. So I had 2 choices: throw the damn thing in a box and keep it solely as a collector's item, or rip the audio file and go into Pro Tools and extract the songs myself. Glutton for punishment, I chose the latter. And honestly, the only reason that I really did it was for the Santa Claus is Coming to Town songs, because that soundtrack is really good, just like the Rudolph one. I spent hours making markers of where to start and end selections, removing non-musical parts of the dialogue, and trying to trim and fade in and out the individual songs to make them feel and sound like standalone tracks. Now I was mostly successful, resulting in most of the Santa Claus tracks coming out great, and most of the Frosty section getting deleted for the reasons I stated earlier. And that's why I can't do a track-by-track review for the Frosty soundtrack, so I'll just sum it up real quick. Most of the musical pieces are devoid of melodic elements and serve more as motifs for the backdrop of character actions, and there are a total of 27 of these goddamn things, with the entire thing clocking in at around 16 minutes. Most of these tracks, if you will, are what I said before, from under 30 seconds to about 30 seconds long, and most of it is just pointless outside of its intended context, which is the special itself. The only part that was actually worth the money and time I put into this half was the latter part, which is where the only bright spots were located. The last few selections, titled Frosty's Theme 6, He Was Made Out of Snow, Frosty's Theme 7, and the best of them all, and the only real piece that was strong enough as a standalone track, the Frosty end theme. Frosty the Snowman had to hurry on his way, but he waved goodbye, saying, "Don't you cry, I'll be back on Christmas Day." So collectively, I give those last 4 segments a 9 out of 10. So yeah, that's about it. That's all I have to say for this soundtrack. I love the special, and I hate to say anything bad about the musical score, but it is what it is. So I'll say this: watch the special. The soundtrack in this particular case works much better when utilized in the intended context. As a standalone record, not so much. Other than the very last track, Frosty's end theme, and the 3 segments before it, nothing here really works on its own. With that said, I unfortunately have to give this record a 1.5 out of 10. I'd like to take this time to thank my editor for all his hard work. Your work is very much appreciated. And to everyone viewing this, I'd like to thank you for your time as well. Now, on a final note, for those who may be interested, today I released a review of the actual Rankin Bass Frosty the Snowman special on my other review channel, which you can find through the link below if you like that kind of content. I hope you all enjoyed this review and are enjoying the winter weather thus far. Join me next week as we review the next Rankin Bass title, 1970's Santa Claus is Coming to Town, which, trust me, has a much better soundtrack. Until then, everyone, be safe and take care of yourselves and each other.